Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. You join us for Season 5, Episode 27. I'm Lloyd Evans, and I'm joined by the amazing Katy Montgomerie. Katy, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's excellent to be here.
Oh, very posh. Katy, you and I have been plotting. We're both well aware of the date, 4th of July, and what it means for our American friends. What say we stage a British takeover and try to reverse that dreadful thing that happened in 1776?
Absolutely. We hereby declare this Talk Heathen show our Dependence Day.
What a frightfully spiffing idea. Welcome, dear Americans, to the Talk Heathen Dependence Day. Let's face it, your experiment with independence has been decidedly mixed since you signed that horrid declaration thingy. But worry not. For the next 90 minutes, we can roll back the clock to the way it all should be and embrace the rule of unelected sponges.
Yes, we all make mistakes, beloved cousins. Our treasured monarch forgives your impertinence and welcomes you into the warm embrace of perpetual servitude.
In fact, perhaps the producers could signal their consent to our counterinsurgency by displaying a photo of Her Majesty. Can we have that? Oh. No.
It seems there's been a mistake. That's not Her Royal Highness. That's the actress Olivia Colman in that disgraceful TV show, The Crown, which depicts the royal family in a most unflattering and disgustingly honest and realistic light.
Yeah, producers, this is most uncalled for. Please could we display a photograph of the Queen?
No.
No.
That's not Her Majesty. That's just some commoner with no royal stock whatsoever.
Agreed, Katy. The Talk Heathen producers are in poor form today. Could we have an actual picture of Her Royal Highness, Queen Elizabeth II, for those Americans who wish to salute her?
No.
Come on,
that's
no.
Not a good photo.
That is really quite bad. I've just remembered I have some announcements to read. Thank goodness. Did you know, Katy, that Talk Heathen is a product of the ACA, a 501, really, a 501c3 organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and separation of religion and government. You did. But did you know that there are ways, Katy, that we can support Talk Heathen and the ACA? Would you like to hear them?
Yeah, sounds really exciting.
Well, you can become a member. You can click the join button below the video. You can support us on Patreon. The address, if you're interested and taking notes, is patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. We also have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form, one of the best forms, in my opinion. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/Talk Heathen FG. And if you'd like to continue the discussion after the show, join us in ACD, our fan-run Discord server at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. Also, make sure to check out the newest version of an ACA show, The Non-Profits, which will air live at 3 p.m. Central Time today. One of the best time zones, in my opinion, at youtube.com//The Non-Profits ACA. What a fine set of announcements we've just had.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's definitely in my top 20 time zones for sure.
It is. It's one of the best. I think GMT personally is, the pinnacle.
It's a bit of a crap.
But this being a call-in show, maybe we should take some calls. I'm looking at the screen and I'm noticing that someone called Aaron in Illinois, which is one of the states of the United States, feels, according to what Aaron said to the call screeners, fully justified in his belief in God, because apparently the Bible is a reliable source of truth. Welcome, Aaron. You are on Talk Heathen.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
I am superb. How are you?
Awesome. I'm blessed.
Excellent.
Man. I'm blessed.
Well, there we go. So, did the call screener understand correctly? You are feeling as though you feel fully justified in your belief in God because you feel the Bible is a reliable source of truth.
Yeah, so a testimony is justification for a belief, correct?
Well, it depends. And
well, no.
Well, what is a testimony?
Is a testimony? Okay, so don't we use testimony in court?
I mean, reliable testimony. We use reliable testimony in court. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. You use reliable testimony, and testimony stands, and that's justification, right, for a belief?
If it's reliable testimony, yeah.
Well, whose opinion is it? Is it your opinion if it's reliable, or is it objective truth?
I'm guessing when you talk about testimony, let's cut to the chase here, because we're adults. I'm guessing when you say testimony, you mean the Bible. And so my question would be, how do you know that the Bible is reliable testimony that we should all base our lives and decisions on?
Yeah. So again, the Bible, and not even the Bible, but all around the world, there's testimonies and witnesses of God working in our world. Again, we do use testimony.
There's evidence from lots of different gods. People, for every single religion there are people saying, for every single religion there's people saying, I have testimony and evidence of my God or gods, performing their magic. How do we know which ones are the reliable ones? Because they can't all be true, can they? So only one at most can be reliable.
Yeah, and you most definitely cannot just ball every religion up into one and say, well, because these are wrong, that one's wrong too, right?
So the one true religion is Shinto.
Yeah.
Is what?
Is Shinto. We've established that the one true religion is Shinto because there is testimony from people who believe in Shinto that it's the one true religion. And theirs is reliable testimony, so we can accept Shintoism.
So therefore Christianity is
okay, and then that meets up with your reality, right?
Pardon?
And that meets up with reality, right? Or no?
Well, you're telling us it doesn't matter whether it meets up with reality or not. You're telling us it matters about the testimony. So if someone tells us they have testimony that a religion, could be any religion, is the one true religion, and they're being spoken to by God, we can base our life decisions on what they're telling us according to your logic.
Well, no, according to your logic, you're saying that testimony is only reliable if you decide it's reliable.
No, I'm not. Again, I'm saying that's not what we've said.
We can't.
It would be really helpful if you don't put words in our mouth.
So you were saying that your testimony is reliable.
Words in my mouth either, see?
So you were saying that your testimony is reliable, and then the people from yes,
the Bible,
Judaism, they're saying their testimony is reliable, and the people from Islam, they're saying their testimony is reliable. So which one are me and Lloyd supposed to take as the reliable one? How do we pick which one is the reliable one?
Well, we all discern things, don't we?
Yeah, and I've just discerned that.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else's religion is more reliable. So how do we know? Like, there's got to be a way to decide. Otherwise, we're all just having an opinion, and then it's worthless.
Yeah. And
it's your opinion.
To test all things, right? Does God's word not say to test all things? So if you put, all these other religions to the test of reality, and in our reality, you should be able to discern between truth and falsity, right?
How many religions have you put to the test? Have you tested all religions that have ever existed in all of time?
Have I tested every religion? No, I don't even know every single religion. I do know.
Well, that's interesting.
Christianity. That's all I'm here to represent. I don't care.
Anyway, I think Katy and I have made our point, which you haven't really answered about, how do we decide which religion gets to? How do we decide? How do we decide?
What I'm getting at is.
Oh, good God. Okay, so the point that we've made is, how do we decide which religion offers reliable testimony? You haven't really answered that. Let's just presuppose for a moment that Christianity is the only proposition that we should think about, which is not something we accept, but let's presuppose that. On what basis are you telling us, because you used the words God's word before, so what's your basis for saying that the Bible is God's word?
Well, again, justification for a belief, philosophically, all you need is justification to believe in something, right? I mean, I don't need your permission to believe in this, nor do you need my permission.
No, you don't.
To believe
you don't need your permission to believe in whatever you want. But when it comes to persuading us,
because you're believing in a testimony, right? I mean,
okay.
It sounds to me like you're trying to. When you call in and say, I have a justified belief in Christianity, that to me sounds like you're saying, I have some kind of evidence or some kind of solid reasoning. But it sounds to me like you're trying to play a little bit of a word game with justified belief and trying to make it sound like all beliefs are justified if there's just some kind of reasoning. So, what are you meaning here by justified? Like, could you actually convince us of your belief? Do you think there's good enough evidence that that's the case, or are you just trying to say that every religious belief is justified to some extent?
No, I would hope that you were, I'm listening to you, and I would hope you wouldn't continue to put words in my mouth. Let's start back from the very beginning. I know you're going all over the place, but what I'm trying to say is a belief not justified through testimony? And
I think you're ignoring what we said right at the beginning, which is taking.
I understand what you're trying to say.
So I'm going to mute you now because you're talking over me. So right at the beginning, you started pushing this whole idea of testimony, and right at the beginning of this conversation, I said it depends whether it's reliable testimony. And what you're doing is you're completely bypassing that need for it to be reliable testimony, and you're just saying no. All we need is testimony. That's all we need. So how are you hoping that we have a productive, meaningful discussion if you're just going to ignore what me and Katy are saying and just barrel ahead with what you wanted to say? It's interesting that you gave the name Preacher Man. I definitely feel like I'm being preached to rather than having an actual dialogue.
Okay.
So how do we move forward? You don't know.
Am I unmuted? I don't know.
You're unmuted now because you were talking over me. Yeah. Oh. So how do we move forward?
Okay. So based on what you just said, with your muting and stuff, I would also hope that you would respect me. And if I'm talking, let me finish my entire collective thought.
You earn respect. You earn respect, and you don't earn respect by completely ignoring what someone's saying to you.
You're talking over me again. I haven't even gotten to my point, and this is how disrespectful you are. So
I'm asking you to get to your point.
Look, we can have a very good conversation, and you can let me, make my point, or you can keep interrupting and not listen. I mean, that's up to you. And I've got other things to do. I can go play with my kids. I can, go to the cookout.
I think you should play with your kids. I think you should, but please do call in again when you're able to actually present your arguments logically. And spoiler alert, simply calling something testimony doesn't mean that we have to listen to it.
You don't even understand that it's belief, right? You're justified.
Oops, I think I might have dropped that caller. Yeah, sorry about that, viewers. No, seriously, Katy, what's the point in giving answers if the caller is just going to completely ignore those answers and just go back to the beginning,
It did just feel like a word game to me, and one of those kind of set up a single word game attack, and then when you come in and show that it doesn't really stand up, they just carry on with it anyway.
Just barrel ahead. And for the record, we may not seem like it at the moment, but we really, really want to speak to theists, but we need to have honest conversations with theists. And honest conversations mean listening to each other's arguments and responding accordingly. And it might be that something I say causes pause for thought, or something Katy says, or even something that the caller says causes us to pause for thought. That's fine, but don't just barrel ahead with what your original argument is as though nothing's been said. Okay, so we have another theist. We have Gerald from Europe. Gerald told our screener, me and many other people are being bullied by an internet preacher online. Should we do something about it? Gerald, welcome.
Hi.
You are on Talk Heathen.
Oh, hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
It's nice talking to you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes, same here. You see, I have been bullied on the internet by the same person.
Okay.
What kind of things are they doing?
Well, this person is an old internet preacher from Oakland, Maryland.
Okay. Can we speed things along a little bit? So I hate bullying. I've been bullied myself as a child, and I've also been on the receiving end of cyberbullying. Maybe Katy knows a bit about that as well.
Yeah.
So bullying is reprehensible, and you have a lot of solidarity here. We're just going to have to move to the story a little bit more quickly, if that's okay.
Okay. There is this guy called Mike Rutkowski that says that he can directly talk to Jesus and God. So I was just, when you try to search things about your religion on the internet and learn something new, I found him. So I decided to look up at his videos, and I became interested, intrigued. He seemed like a nice person, but when I actually talked to him, he treated me bad and was a real jerk. Do you get how that feels?
Yes.
Yes. I know what it's like to encounter unpleasant people. I guess with the bullying thing, it really depends what platform the bullying is on. If, for example, it's on Twitter, maybe you could report it. If it's on Facebook, maybe I know Facebook's a bit rubbish for that sort of thing, but if you can report it, possibly try that. Sometimes different countries have anti-harassment laws that include online harassment. So those are all avenues that you might consider pursuing. I'm just interested, because you're a theist, and I don't get to speak to that many theists on a day-to-day basis. What was it about this individual's original arguments that you found so compelling? What drew you to assume that this individual was actually some kind of channel with the Almighty?
Well, it's just that he sounded so nice and believing. When people talk about stuff and it sounds so convincing, it was the way he talked. It sounded like he said it was true. And he used the Bible to back his arguments up. But then I found out that this wasn't just a preacher talking, not just a man talking to God. It was like he was some sort of cult leader. The more I learned about him, the more I did not like what I saw.
So is there a reason that you still do you still have a relationship with this person? Do you still communicate with them or hang around in the same spaces as them? Or is this someone that you can just kind of block and move on and, leave?
It is not just that. He doesn't just hang out on YouTube and Facebook. He pops out a little here and there over the internet and bullies people.
So are you more concerned at how he's bullying other people than yourself? Because if you just want to avoid bullying yourself, sometimes you can just, step back, cut off communication and wait for them to pick someone else, which is a little bit selfish. But if you're really struggling with it, it can free you up at least. But if you then see someone who's bullying lots of people and you want to act, perhaps that's more the angle you're going for?
Yes, that is that. It's just I can ignore him. I really can. It's just that I can't just stand that he's getting away with it. It's like let me do a comparison. It's like when you have a daughter and that daughter is murdered by a person and the murderer gets away. You just can't stand the thought that a murderer is out there.
Right.
They never come back.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Maybe a little bit less extreme than that, but I guess so. I guess it depends what kind of thing that you're proposing to do here. I mean, I've had situations before where there is someone who has a terrible belief system and they're using it to, harass people and people that I, think should just be left alone. And sometimes if you have a big enough platform or you're determined enough, you can just, every time they go and assert their crappy, worldview, you can just go in and provide the facts and humiliate them in front of their audience that they're trying to provide. If someone turns up and they're like, oh, my God says that you're bad and all this kind of stuff, and then you just turn up and say, well, actually, this person has no evidence for this assertion, and here's the logical fallacy they're committing, and, here is the things wrong with their worldview every single time, it will get very frustrating for them for that situation. And you might also inspire other people to do the same things. That is difficult to do, but I think sometimes you can do it, and especially if you do have a larger internet platform, that's something you can do.
Yes. But this is why I called. This person is a pure, how do I say, a pure jerk bag. Let me explain.
Wow. Don't hold back there, Gerald. Don't hold back. But no, seriously, it's not pleasant, is it? And all I can recommend is that, again, you follow due process as much as you can. Yeah. Use the whatever options are available to you to report and block and that kind of thing, and maybe report to the authorities. I would as well recommend, and this is maybe coming from left field, looking into critical thinking, looking into logical fallacies, because that's what a lot of these kind of charlatans use. They use the charisma and they use bad arguments that can easily be debunked. And if you study critical thinking and logical fallacies, this might make it easier for you to identify the bad arguments early on and not get drawn in again. Would that be helpful, do you think?
Wait, I have to talk. Before I was interrupted, after I said jerkbag, I was going to say that this person blocks anyone that has a different view than him, and he calls them wicked unbelievers that do not believe in God.
That sounds like an easy thing to deal with then, because you can just disagree with him and just tell anyone you see if he comes in and starts harassing people, just say, disagree with him, tell him that his beliefs are false, and he'll block them. Problem solved.
Yes, but he's on the internet. I just want to, cut out the problem at its source. I mean, I do not want to rally people up, but I just say that somebody should do something about Mike Rutkowski.
Okay.
Did you get the name? It's Mike.
Well, anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Gerald, for calling into the show. And again, I really hope you're able to sort out that issue of bullying.
And, as this is the British takeover, if anyone wants a different insult to total jerkbag, you could say absolute wanker.
Katy is an expert at insults. It's one of her superpowers. Okay, so we have another. I'm aware of the fact that we have some atheist callers, and I'm absolutely thrilled to take those calls. It's just that I feel as though we should prioritize theists. So we have a theist. This theist is from Arizona. His name is Christopher. He feels that we should not debunk religious systems because it makes people worse. They would be more likely to steal or cheat, more prone to drugs and alcohol. Christopher from Arizona, welcome to Talk Heathen.
Hello. I think you have no evidence for that assertion.
What was that?
I think you have no evidence for the assertion that without religion, people would steal more.
Oh, actually, I have, experimental evidence that, yes, religious people are less likely to steal. They're more likely to contribute to charity. They're less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. They're less likely to...
Is that a study that's done on... Is that a study that's done in like a society where the dominant there isn't a dominant religion, and then comparing it to a society where there is? Or is this like just looking at Americans, where the vast majority of people are religious and you get punished by society for not being religious, so are more likely to be isolated and turn to crime because of struggling to live? Just potentially guessing.
They've done it cross-culturally. They've done it cross-culturally and intra-culturally. And
that's convenient, isn't it?
In both places.
This is a really thorough experiment that we just have to trust you, Christopher, has been concluded and peer-reviewed.
It wasn't a single experiment. There are multiple cross-cultural studies. For instance, Pew in 2019, you can literally Google Pew religion's relationship to happiness and civic engagement and health around the world, and they look at about 20 different countries and find extremely large effect sizes for the effect of religion across health.
I think there might be there might be a bit of confirmation bias there, Christopher, because I've looked at studies that say the exact opposite. So it looks to me like you've seen something on Pew studies or something somewhere and just jumped to this conclusion. If you have religion, you're going to be less of a criminal, or you're going to have a more moral life in some way, which is not just wrong, it's also kind of insulting.
Could I say something? You know that in a people...
Oh, sorry, am I not allowed to talk? Is Talk Heathen just Christopher's channel? To have a conversation, I need to be able to respond. And Katie's responded, and now I've responded, and now you can respond. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Your response was that I'm biased, which is a complete ad hominem, and is not an argument whatsoever, because I could just as easily appeal to your biases for your data. So I'm talking about comparing the largest data sets and the largest effect sizes and coming up with what is actually true.
And you're asking us to take your word for the fact that you've done this?
No, I just told you where to find the study.
We can leave it to the Talk Heathen viewers to go and do their own research and find out whether what you say is true. But I'm here to say that it sounds like you've again cherry-picked, and there's been some confirmation bias here, because when I look at those sorts of figures, I often find that, for example, in Scandinavian countries, compared to more religious countries, the crime rates tend to be lower. That's what I've seen. You could call it confirmation bias. But again, this whole idea that you need religion, I mean, what does it say about someone if you need belief in a God who will cast you into eternal flames in order to be a good person?
The belief. It isn't necessarily having...
Yeah, but I didn't say it was about the belief, but what does it say? What does it say about
that if somebody has
to
believe in God in order to act morally? You just said that. You just said if somebody needs to believe in God.
I don't want to live. Morally. I don't want to live in a society where that's the case. I would shudder at the thought, and I live in a Catholic country, by the way. I would shudder at the thought that all of my neighbors only aren't killing me and only aren't raping me because they believe in the Pope and they believe in Mother Mary and they believe in God. I dignify them with more humanity than that.
It has nothing to do with that. What I suggest is that you look more closely at the experimental psychology and sociology and evolutionary biology of religion, because can I finish my sentence, or do you want to?
Yeah, you can. I don't have to take it seriously, though.
That's fine.
Oh, he's
That's
gone.
fine. I would like to tell the truth. That it actually has very, very little to do with the explicitly held quote-unquote religious belief, but it has all to do with the religious participation in these religious systems cross-culturally and historically, evolutionarily. That is where the benefits come from, is from these extremely tight social bonds in trusting communities where interpersonal trust and social capital is higher than in any other type of secular non-religious group that attempts to contrive tight social bonds with norms and things like that.
Sounds like a lot of jumping to conclusions, though, because, I mean, even if you found out that religious people were more likely to be happy and you didn't Oh, and you manage to control for the fact that most countries are majority religious and often punish atheists, you would still then have the situation of which way round is causing that. Maybe people who are more likely to be happy and people who are more likely to be in strong family units are more likely to be religious because that causes active participation in the society that's set up for you.
So there's a really cool study where they look at Ashkenazi Jews, a single community of Ashkenazi Jews, where they look at the secular Jews and the religious non-secular Jews within the same community, and they find the same effects. So what I'm telling you is that this kind of, whatever, like that I'm just throwing out bullshit data is completely wrong. You can look at Richard Sosis and look at his review article titled "More Than Belief," and I'm telling you guys that you have the idea that all that religion is these bullshit beliefs is completely flies in the face of everyone who legitimately studies this.
So from your study that you mentioned earlier, the Pew Research one, there's a quote here that says, while the data presented in this report indicate that there are links between religious activity and certain measures of well-being in many countries, the numbers do not prove that going to religious services is directly responsible for improving people's lives. Rather, it could be that certain kinds of people tend to be more active in multiple types of activities, secular as well as religious, many of which may provide physical or psychological benefits. Moreover, such people may be more active partly because they are happier and healthier rather than the other way round.
That's what I was saying before about confirmation bias. Very easy to come across some figures and think, oh, these agree with my view, and just tout them as though this is your slam dunk evidence. And then when Katy goes and drills down a little bit, it's not as simple as that. So that's, I think, confirmation bias. It might be worthwhile you researching that a little bit.
I wasn't basing my entire thesis off of a single experiment.
You're basing it on evolutionary biology and philosophy and all sorts. We get that.
Or are you just going to interrupt continuously, which you warned me not to do from the beginning?
Quite like interrupting.
So what I was going to say was that if you... Are you going to... Okay, so what I was going to say was that if you look at the psychology and neuroscience of religiosity, one of the worst possible things that you can do to an individual psychologically is, one of the worst processes that they can go through psychologically is apostasy. It has one of the absolute worst outcomes for so many different variables as far as drug and alcohol abuse.
That's interesting you should say that, Christopher, because you're speaking to an apostate. You're speaking to somebody who about 10 years ago figured out that what he'd been told his entire life about every single person around him being worthy of imminent destruction at Armageddon might not be true, that it might not be true that a leadership based in New York was invisibly chosen by Jesus in 1919. That might not be true. And coming to these conclusions, realize that actually it's actually better and more healthy to not have a cult in New York micromanage his life and actually do something about it and leave. And not just leave, but speak out about the fact that this group is exploitative and abusive and manipulative, which is something I continue to do on YouTube and elsewhere. So since I started doing that, I've personally found, anecdotally, that my life is far more satisfying and enriching. I have a far more healthy view of the people around me because I understand how finite their lives are and how dependent we all are on each other for making our lives better and making our communities better. And yet what you've just said is that my life has deteriorated since I became an apostate because I apparently needed my belief in Jehovah's Witnesses to be a good person and to lead a happy life, which hasn't really been my experience. So to stop myself from interrupting you, I actually muted you, and now I will unmute.
Thank you. Okay, so what you're doing, this is not what I said at all. What you're doing is you're taking what I'm saying when I'm talking about a statistical average, and you're saying that it doesn't apply to you as an individual, which of course I wouldn't claim whatsoever. I'm talking about means of groups of people and means of studies, both intraculturally and cross-culturally. And it has nothing to do with your personal experience as an individual and your personal.
We're not talking about. So you're not talking about individual experiences. everyone has to just base their decisions as to whether they apostatize or not on your data, average. on your averages, on your formulae, on your philosophy studies. That's what we should be basing our decisions on.
No, what I'm saying is, well, hold on. If you're going to implement, like, let's say, vaccines for a nation, you're going to do so based on statistical averages of effect sizes and efficacy, okay? You're not going to say, well, this one person had some horrible immune reaction or a blood clot, so therefore we should not give the vaccine to millions of people. That's absurd.
If we're trying to make the population... If we're trying to make the population happier and less likely to commit crime, and we say, wow, we've done some studies and we find out that religious people are better off than atheists, then, as the people in charge creating the system, we could say, well, there's all these different religions and it actually doesn't matter which religion we pick. It's just any religion on average makes people happier. So we might as well invent a religion, because all of the religions that there are, that I've personally encountered anyway, have a lot of crap things in them. And we could just make up a new religion and we can teach everyone it. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not, because we're just improving well-being here. But that's kind of the main point in doing that. So we'll have this religion and we'll say that, this person is basically a god, and women are inferior and all this kind of stuff that comes with religion. But it's just a little bit better. It's like Christianity, but like a little bit better. Is that a moral thing to do? Is that something is that a good thing? Like, if we just created a new religion and forced it on a population to improve alcoholism rates or something?
No. So I would say that, sure, once you accept that both intra-culturally and cross-culturally that religious individuals and groups are much happier, healthier, and are more engaged in civic duty and charity and things like that, then you can move forward and try to discern which religions at a global level are better or worse than one another. We could make a better.
My point is that if we're then picking which religion to teach people based on which one makes people happiest, why pick a pre-existing one when we could engineer one? We could make up a whole new set of lies. We could make up a whole
worship Smurfs.
System.
We need to worship Smurfs and follow the Smurfs because the Smurfs are God's one true religion, and we need to worship them and listen to everything they say. This is the new truth that will make everyone more moral. Is that what you're suggesting?
Or at least more happy?
No, it's a very simple answer, and you can look at any. You can just look at
not as sophisticated as your answer.
Whatever contrived religions, and compare them to religions that have been around for tens of thousands of years. And you can see that
age. The longer you've been around, the more valid your moral will be.
No.
So it's not just. So we're excluding Scientology, are we? We're excluding NXIVM, all of the new religions. You're zeroing in on well-established religions.
Okay. No. So first of all, in the literature where people actually study this shit, they discriminate between cults and religions based on certain metrics.
I haven't studied any.
Yeah, I know you don't.
Ignoramus.
Well, yes, if you consider Scientology or NXIVM a religion, then yes, you are not someone.
And now we get down to brass tacks, because I sense that it's not just about any religion. It's not just about any set of morals. You told our call screener that you're a theist. I think that this is all about your personal bias towards a particular religion that you think offers the best morals. If I had to hazard a guess, it would be Christianity. But before I unmute you, here's my whole problem with your premise. What you're suggesting, if you replace religion in your argument with lies, your argument is people need religion in order to be moral. If you replace religion with lies, which is what we're saying it is, people need lies to be moral. Again, what does that say about people? I prefer to dignify my fellow humans by saying you can have a moral, meaningful, satisfying life without me lying to you or without believing anyone else's lies. And you are effectively insulting not just me, but everybody by saying you wouldn't know how to function in society without being lied to and without believing lies. And I give you more dignity than to suggest that that's true of you. And I give my fellow humans more dignity than to suggest that that's true of them. And now I will unmute.
Okay, so I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess what I would say is that you must either have not been listening or completely misunderstood what I basically began with, was that what religion itself is not simply reducible to beliefs in propositions.
Oh, God.
That is not what religion is. Religion is a participatory group with it's centered around behavior.
When you said that earlier, though,
and ritual.
You also said that no secular groups had. I can't remember if you said no secular group could match like the social aspects of religion, or no religious or no secular group has. But so which one was it? Was it no group could or no group has?
Probably both. And so,
the assertion that no group could is kind of saying that the belief part of the religion is like a core component of it.
Indeed.
So it's either core and essential, or it's not. And if it's not, then we can recreate it. And
you've already dismissed newer religions like Scientology and NXIVM. So you're already narrowing it down to whatever religions that you deem to be not cults. So it's all incredibly arbitrary on your side. So it actually turns out that it is belief-driven.
And
now he's laughing.
One thing, it's not...
Okay, off you go. Sorry, no. Stick by the original premise. Don't just go moving the goalposts. When we say religion, don't just say, oh, it's not to do with beliefs. And when we say, I think that your preference is for a certain religion, oh, God. That was so frustrating.
I think that like when someone makes the argument that religion is good because traditionally all the religions we have like all this like social stuff and networks and worship and all this kind of stuff that, you know, makes people feel good and makes people have a strong society, then you can either say, well, we can just recreate that without these unjustified beliefs, and then, you know, they will then say either, oh, well, you need the beliefs, and then they're making the belief argument and they're not really making the society argument, or they say this can't be done, and then they're making some assertion that somehow the belief makes the like social aspect special. But basically what I'm trying to say here is if you're arguing that going to church makes people's lives better, then you could go to some kind of church without having some belief that's unjustified. We could just recreate that in a secular way.
I do run into these people. You know, thinking off the top of my head, there's people like Douglas Murray who make these arguments. And frankly, it's just so insulting to everyone. Again, what does it say about our fellow primates if the only thing that's stopping them from coming and murdering or raping us is their belief in lies? You know, I'd rather dignify people and say, no, actually, you can be a good person without believing in lies.
Or even if it's not that extreme, even if he was just saying, oh, it makes you a bit happier. But I don't really know. If someone was like, oh, I could convince you of a lie and it would make you happier, I don't know if I'd want that, because, I mean, how many lies would I accept to be happier and happier? How many like things would I of the world would I just start denying reality in order to be happier? Like, I guess being happy is a good thing, but I guess it's not the only aspect of well-being, and it's not the only aspect of your life.
Yeah, I've actually said before on my channel that in some ways I'm happier, in some ways I'm not. But I'd still rather not believe lies if you don't mind, you know. So
I actually think that I would rather there was some kind of afterlife than not, and I'm not in that situation, and I wished I did believe in some kind of afterlife. So please call in and convince me, because that would make me happier, but I can't. There just isn't.
Well, I can see our call screeners busy working away, screening some more calls. So who knows? maybe this will be the Talk Heathen episode where a theist calls in and convinces us that God is real. But unfortunately, so far, we've been disappointed. Let's dip into our atheist callers. I'm actually going to go for the one that's been on the longest. Feel quite sorry for Gregory, who's calling in from Tennessee and wants to know what happens in the human brain when one becomes convinced. Gregory, welcome to Talk Heathen.
Hello, this is Gregory in East Tennessee. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for waiting for a whole hour to come on the show.
Oh, well, that's fine. I've been listening to the other callers and making notes, so hopefully some of the things you've said to them and what they've said will make this a better discussion as well.
Okay. So go ahead. What's your question?
Just for a little background, I used to be a strong theist. I spent 10 years in Eastern Orthodox Christian seminary, was on the fast track to becoming a priest, and something convinced me along the line that this was not going to be my life's path. I started listening to atheist shows, particularly Matt Dillahunty's shows, and when I started listening, I was firmly in the camp that belief involved choice, because the dictionary definition of belief uses the word accept, and you look up accept, and it seems to apply there's a choice there. So I vehemently disagreed with Matt until he convinced me otherwise, and I've noticed he started using the phrase become convinced when someone changes their belief. So this is we've come this far in the journey away from belief being a choice, and now people are becoming convinced of this or that. So now I'm very interested in how does one become convinced? Why is one person convinced by an argument while another person remains unconvinced?
Right. Can we just check just before we go on, if you're on speakerphone, can you turn off the speaker and just go into normal?
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm just on the headset and I have the show muted.
Okay, no problems. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because I guess like the last thing we just said on the last call, I would love to believe in an afterlife, even if there wasn't one, because the idea of just stopping existing stresses me out. And if I could just choose to believe in an afterlife, then I would. But I think it's like a lot of things. Like I can't choose to believe that, I can fly because I just know that's not the case. Like I could say that out loud. I could say, oh, I believe that I can fly. But it's not actually something I believe. And I couldn't convince myself without some kind of evidence that I could. And it's the same with believing in an afterlife or believing in religions. The question of why some people believe some evidence and others don't believe the same, aren't convinced by the same evidence. I mean, that's quite a deep question, I guess, and that's kind of like what these shows are all about.
Right.
But I think critical thinking and stuff can show you can learn how to evaluate evidence, and it can show you that something that might seem convincing on the surface, it can teach you that there's like a logical trick going on here or a sleight of hand, which makes something seem convincing at first when actually it's not a good, rational, logical argument. And so you will see people who will approach something and they'll see it and they'll, that sounds like convincing to me. And then when you point out there's actually a logical fallacy at the root of it, then it comes crumbling down. And some people will be practiced at looking for logical fallacies or would have just been explained how this argument has logical fallacy before, so then they won't be convinced by the same argument. There is a skill in assessing evidence that you can learn.
Yes, I agree, and it was learning critical thinking skills and being able to recognize logical fallacies when they're presented that, better prepared me to either accept or reject a case when it's made. And I noticed we've got some adjectives here from previous calls. They were talking about justified belief or reliable evidence. So it's not just enough to present evidence. It has to be reliable evidence. If you're going to assert a belief, you're going to have to present something to justify it that's not a logical fallacy and that is in line with critical thinking. And what you mentioned, the fear of death, it's like the fear that's brought on by an existential crisis is not enough to convince me that this otherwise unsubstantiated claim is true. So I've been trying to develop a thought experiment to help me understand this, and kind of pretty simple. Could be along lines of like two identical twins approach a chasm, and there's a rope bridge across. They both have. They both decide there's a good reason to cross, but one decides, okay, the rope bridge is going to hold me, and the other one decides, no, it's not. So obviously it's the same bridge, the same physical conditions, so why is one person convinced it's safe to cross and the other one isn't? Is it about acceptable risk, just the amount of risk we're willing to accept to get what we want?
I think sometimes it's just down to brain chemistry, isn't it? Yeah. We're all different people. And that's why, you know, when I look at your question, what happens in the human brain when one becomes convinced? Frankly, I feel underqualified to answer it because I've never studied psychology. And I would imagine there's a far more deeply satisfying answer to be yielded from someone who has, you know, made it their mission in life to understand how the brain works and how the brain responds to different propositions. But intuitively, I would guess that it's going to be
instead, is what you're saying.
Intuitively, I would guess that it's going to be different from one human to the next, and that different people are going to have different thresholds when it comes to what is a persuasive proposition and what isn't.
Yeah, and I think if we're like talking down to like brain chemistry and like brain structure, then and if we accept the assertion that there's like no soul or some mystical supernatural component to your decision making, then your decisions are going to be based on the structure of your brain, which changes as you grow, as you get older, based on, you know, various factors, and the like chemical levels and stuff. And we might be able to in the future come in and poke around a little bit or put some chemicals in and just convince you of anything. I mean, that might be possible. And I think it seems reasonable from the evidence that I've seen and my understanding of human brains and thought patterns and stuff, that when we say what is it to be convinced, like on a sort of a physical level, there will be some kind of set of structures and chemicals which are present in some form. I mean, it's very complicated. I don't think it's going to be as simple as like there's a connection here or not, but it's, you know, there's going to be some combination of structures and chemicals which will be present in one of your identical twins and not in the other one. And I think, you know, that'll be based on how they've grown and the experiences they've had in life and, well, basically nature and nurture.
Yeah, and well, anything even just as simple as alcohol. Someone who's intoxicated with alcohol might be more easily convinced that something is a good idea, whereas if they were sober, they would be like, wait a minute, that's going to have consequences. So, yeah,
for example,
it's to do with brain chemistry.
For example, when Katy
younger,
Katy is intoxicated, she might look at this and think, now there's some tasty mayonnaise.
I would never. That is a slur against my character. I'd never be so drunk as to tolerate mayonnaise.
So there is a threshold there.
Well,
okay.
How long is it
You brought that on this show just for me.
Sorry.
Sorry, Gregory. It suddenly got very personal
How
here.
long has the potato salad been left out in the sun? Do I want to believe that it's going to make me sick if I eat it or not? So I definitely hear where you're coming from on that. When I was younger, I was very easily convinced by theologians of their point of view, and I think that's why religion, you know, get them while they're young and susceptible to easily believing. Yep. But I would take the same arguments that the theologian made to me to someone else, and they would point out how, you know, that's just fallacious, or here's the hole in the argument. So I was convinced by an argument, but someone else wasn't, and they pointed out the flaw in the argument. I would take their counter-argument back to the theologian, and of course they would have a counter-argument to that. So I think you're right. It comes down to a personal bias, and if some people are easily swayed by a personality or the methodology of the presentation, or by a fallacy that seems convincing at face value, but when you look at it critically, it falls apart.
So when we're talking about like get them while they're young, that it's worth pointing out that we do understand that there are parts of people's brains which are specialized in certain things, responsible for decision making, responsible for restraint, and all these different kinds of things. And people's brains develop as they grow, and certain areas in your brain finish developing at different times. And certainly, like your ability to do critical thinking and your ability to reason and make logical arguments is something that isn't fully developed in teenagers and young adults. So that's, it is true that you will hear an argument and be convinced when you're younger, and then you present it to someone who's older than you, and they'll be more likely to, be able to see through the reasoning, but not necessarily, because, like you say, it depends on your genetics and your experiences and what you've been taught and all kinds of different things. But for sure, even growing up, the physical structure of your brain can be something that's holding you back in being able to reason through these arguments.
Yeah, I remember thinking when I was younger, they tell me something. I said, well, I don't know or think to myself, I don't know if I necessarily believe this, but I'm not in a position to argue with them, and if I do, it's going to make me an outsider to the group. So I'd rather be a joiner than be ostracized, but I don't want to be a follower because I'm not convinced yet. So it kind of put me on this middle ground between, okay, I associate with this group, I go along with what they're doing and what they're saying, but I don't necessarily hold these beliefs as absolute myself. I want to wait and see kind of attitude. Being young, you really think, well, I don't know yet, so I'll wait and see. And of course, later on, it usually turns out that their arguments are full of holes and not appeals to emotion are very common.
Yeah.
Well, for the record, I think, it says a lot about you that when you are presented by these arguments, you do the digging, you do apply skepticism and critical thinking, and it's hopefully brought you to a better place in life. Unfortunately, we do need to move on to other calls, but I just want to thank you again for being on hold for all that time and for calling in to Talk Heathen.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, and I'm going to continue to try to refine my thought experiment to, make it more precise and give more insights. So thank you to both of you.
Go back with that.
Happy Independence Day.
Happy Dependence Day.
Yes,
come on.
Dependence Day.
Some people just aren't getting the script here. But yes, perhaps now would be a good point in the show to talk about Patreon. There are some patrons whose names should be read out because they are helping to support the entire project. It's not easy to host a show on this level. There's lots of nuts and bolts involved. So people like
we're some of the nuts.
We're the nuts. We're the British nuts.
Yeah.
Eric Tweet, your support through Patreon is very much appreciated, as is that of CJ Dennis, Dingleberry Jackson. Thank you so much. Balaam's Donkey, that takes me back. And Paul Lear gets an honorary mention. We also have seemingly winning the competition for interesting names, the Great North American Dingaloo. So thank you to all of you for your incredible support on Patreon. Again, the address to support this show on Patreon is patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. Now, Katy, would you like to take some more calls?
I guess.
It's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Let's do it. I'm super ready. I'm ready.
You're not allowed to back out of it. I asked you the question, giving the impression that you could back out of it. But a little bit like the monarchy, once you've got it, you've just got to stick with it, unless you're America. So,
well, I was feeling more enthused until you cracked out the slime earlier. So,
when you say slime, do you mean that?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, right. But it says seriously good mayonnaise.
Yeah, but like the Christian church claims it's good as well. So,
but that's probably product placement. Sorry, Talk Heathen. But that's testimony. That's testimony, isn't it? So we should just accept it. Anyway,
mayonnaise is a religion.
We have a caller from Minnesota, Ryan. Ryan says his family is extremely theist. His sister is having miscarriages. Life at conception, he's apparently being told. Family is blaming her. Sounds like a really difficult situation. Ryan, you are on Talk Heathen. How can we help you?
Hi, guys. Basically, I'm an atheist, and I have been for a number of years, as is my wife, and our entire family is extremely conservative Christian, and specifically so my sister and her husband. Basically, she's been struggling with miscarriages and failed attempts at getting pregnant for about a year now. And due to her beliefs, life begins at conception. Basically, they're treating every miscarriage as like a death in the family. And I know every miscarriage is definitely hard, regardless of belief. But my wife and I struggled with that. But they're taking it to such an extreme where they're like creating murals and other stuff like that. And in addition to that, my family is even more so indoctrinating her religious beliefs, like by blaming her or maybe in not so direct ways, but saying maybe she's gotten away from God or hasn't went to church enough or hasn't prayed about it enough, or maybe God just has a plan for her. And it's indoctrinating her even more. And so I've been noticing this over the year and even further back with other things. And she's become so indoctrinated that she's lost pretty much most of her skepticism, and she's getting into conspiracy theories and other conspiracies, and it's going down a rabbit hole. And I'm trying to help her and be there for her and be supportive the best way I can. But it's not really doing anything. I mean, she has her own life. She's an adult, but I don't want to see her suffer and be sad and upset and act as if someone's dying every time. And I'm not sure how I can reach her, I guess.
I think that having a miscarriage, even just one miscarriage, can be an incredibly emotional, distressing thing to deal with. And, especially if she's had more than one in a row. And that, having a really distressful, emotional time, people reach out, and look for something to make them feel better and to help them. And obviously she's leaning into religion, and it might be good to try and help her find another option. There's probably groups for women who have miscarried in the area. There might be online groups as well where they can talk, and maybe find one. Perhaps if they're very religious, they won't want one that's like explicitly atheist or explicitly secular, but there could be just one that's maybe a bit more milder on the religion front, but that uses, sort of evidence and has actual sort of sensible discussions about miscarrying. And they can say, well, miscarrying is actually just something that happens to some people and it doesn't mean anything in terms of God. And it might help her to hear that from, people with some kind of authority or people who have been through that, other women who have been through it. Because otherwise, she is going to turn to other things. And as things get more and more stressful, and especially if the people she's turning to are blaming it on her and her like failure to believe it hard enough or something, then she's going to be more desperate and reaching out for more and more like beliefs. And like you say, dropping any kind of critical thinking, which is kind of scary. And I think that, there's probably lots of factors going on here, and I wouldn't want to just say, oh, she's had a miscarriage and now she's into QAnon. But certainly it could be good to, if you can, try and help her find some kind of support group or people who have experienced it themselves.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot, and I think the only issue I have is that she lives out of state, so I only see her once every couple months or so. And so I have limited access to talk to her directly and personally like that. And she, frankly, I don't think she's the type of person to go to a therapist for something. She's just not she's not that open like that, I guess. And she's very protective of her beliefs and of her miscarriaging and stuff like that. She really is not open about any of it. To discuss criticisms or constructive criticism or anything about it. And so that's why basically I'm trying to, in the moments I have, to be personable with her and, just be her brother. I'm looking to try to help. Like I said, I've tried. I've basically tried talking to her directly about how, it's not her fault. These things happen to good people for no apparent reason, and that's life, and it sucks, and it's unfortunate for everybody involved. But life goes on. We can try again, tomorrow, and that really hasn't helped because, like I said, my family is the ones who really surround her. Mostly. And so that's the constant input she's getting. So, I was also recommended the, Recovering from Religious Foundation or group. And there's in no way would she ever do something like that. So that's why I'm trying to figure out tips, I guess, for me to try to do or say something, but I don't even know if it's possible.
I think
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that, from my perspective, and it's not probably the answer that you want to hear, but it sounds like you're sort of doing everything you can. The old adage, I think, applies. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Your first responsibility as her brother is to be there for her, to love her and be supportive, and to help her to the extent possible to understand that she isn't to blame for this, and that she might be susceptible at this vulnerable stage to being persuaded by people who have bad arguments. But the problem that you have when it comes to cognitive dissonance is, nobody reacts well to just having information thrust in front of them, especially if it's information that completely contradicts their preconceptions. And it seems that that's what you're running up against. And unfortunately, that's just basic psychology. There's some good, there are some good methods for having quote unquote impossible conversations. If you look into street epistemology, that might be one avenue to go down, so that next time you have a conversation with her, you might make a little bit more headway. But my first concern for your sister would be, is she getting professional mental health care? And unfortunately, as an adult, she's the one who has to ask for it. You can't just bundle her into a van and take her to a therapist and make sure she gets the mental health care. As an adult, she needs to pursue that herself. And if you advise it and she ignores your advice, and if she absolutely must be in this state of self-loathing and delusion that her family is putting her in, all you can do is your best. And I guess my main advice would be, apart from the street epistemology thing, don't hate yourself, because this isn't a situation that you have much control over. So, you can only do what you can, but ultimately your sister has personal agency, and you can't tell her what to do in this situation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's perfect. It's a perfect answer. And I definitely should and will bring up, trying to just get some help with it, dealing with it, to her. And I have some insight with street epistemology. I've done some sort of amateur light debates with like my family's pastor and other very highly religious, accoladed friend of the family and stuff like that. And they've went well. They've been good conversations. I've let them listen to them. I've recorded them, and they thought they were good and very constructive, but I didn't really make a ton of headway. But I think I'm maybe breaking a little bit of ice. But yeah, I'm 28, and so I've been an adult for a decade basically, but I'm kind of just coming to terms with how, like my parents as an example, I looked up to them for my whole life and even now, and I'm just struggling dealing with knowing that, the people I look up to aren't able to like think critically on some of these really important issues, and they're not good skeptics, and they fall for scams and multi-level marketing schemes and just all these things. And it's just I'm sad, and I'm just kind of depressed over the fact that I want to help them, and I want to make them think more intellectually and have.
But you don't have any control over it. You do not have any control over it whatsoever. And it's as infuriating as hell, because I'm in that situation. I left the Jehovah's Witness religion, and I live with Jehovah's Witnesses, my wife's parents.
Wow, yeah.
And I would give anything, my wife would give anything for them to snap out of this delusion that's having an impact still on our lives, even though they should be shunning us and they found reasons not to.
They're allowed to do that.
It's complicated, but essentially we're able to have some contact, but there's still an impact on our lives due to their delusion. And you just want more than anything to just grab them and say, you're being lied to. Let us explain why. But if they're not willing to have that conversation, you're out of the loop. And you shouldn't hate yourself for being powerless. You either have the power to do something or you don't. If you don't have the power, and you're out of the loop, you've just got to let people get on with what they're doing. And sometimes, just sometimes, there might be just a little chink. The door might just open slightly, and they might want a little bit of two-way dialogue. And when those moments come, you can be ready to pounce on them with street epistemology, or at least meaningful discussion that's based on logic and that's kind and caring, and understanding of the fact that this is a monumental challenge that's ahead of you to try and persuade them. But when the door is just firmly slammed shut, I guess it's a case of not hating yourself and just learning to live with the fact that you have no control over this situation.
I think there's when you're growing up, you have a very unique relationship with your parents, and they're kind of your superiors, and you trust them with everything, and you think they're great and stuff. And then growing up, you realize that you get to a stage in adulthood where you are just equals. They don't have that kind of parental, almost like godlike status over you, and it can be very easy to just kind of keep that there and keep seeing them the same way, and it is sad, but sometimes you do need to move them into a new place, a new stage in your relationship where they're like adults in your life who you love, they're your family and they are still your parents, but they don't have that kind of controlling angle on the kind of authority, and you respect them without question. When you said you're 28 and you're coming to terms with that, it just made me think I had a similar thing at a similar age, and I feel like I can empathize where you kind of the kind of the illusion of your parents is kind of smashed, and they're still great people, and they're still people that you love, but they're no longer this kind of perfect example, and you realize they're just flawed humans like everyone else, and it's just that's okay. It's okay for them to be that, and you can still have a great relationship with them, and they might come around, like Lloyd said.
Just don't hate yourself.
I appreciate all that. Yeah, and the one thing too that is extra weird is we, or not even weird, it's great, is that we are really close still about everything. Like we just got back from a fishing trip with them, but it was great. Religion didn't really come up at all, and it was fantastic. But there's just this barrier, this wall that we cannot tread, and like when my sister's over, they will force everybody to pray, and my wife and I don't, but just stuff like that, where whenever they can insert religion, they do, and and then that's where things get serious, and they break down and refuse to talk about anything. But otherwise, we're super close, we're super happy with one another, just with the exception of this barrier. And so, yeah, like I said, I'm coming to terms with that. And I like you said, Lloyd, I want to reach out and just shake them awake, basically. But it's Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's something I'm gonna have to, like you said, when those moments come, reach out and try to pounce on them when I can, and do the best I can with that.
That's all you can do. You can only do your best. And there's no magic bullet. If there were a magic bullet for getting rid of bad ideas, we probably would not be doing this show.
Yeah.
But we do empathize with your situation, and we really appreciate you calling in. And hopefully what we've said is in some way helpful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess just on one final note, I am a big fan of Matt Dillahunty. He was one of the people that I watched when I was kind of coming out of religion, and he was outstanding in just his approach and his syllogisms, and every way he approaches it. That really clicked with me. Was logic and reasoning, and that's what got me out of it, because that's just how my mind works. But the problem with my family is that's not how they operate whatsoever. That stuff does not click with them. And so I'm trying to put forth an olive branch or something that will reach them or click with them. And I'm like I said, I'm probably going to keep digging for that thing. And I'm trying. So.
Okay. That's all you can do. And again, don't hate yourself. But again, thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks. And good luck.
Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, sorry. Dropped you a bit too abruptly there. So, Katy, I have a confession to make. I am 42 years old this year, and I have never yet spoken to a Germanic polytheist. But that is about to change.
Oh, exciting.
Because we have Mike.
Because my cat's... Oh, okay.
We have Mike from Ohio who wants to talk about his belief in creation as a Germanic polytheist. The complexity of the brain implies design, so he says. So let's see what Mike has to say. Mike, welcome to Talk Heathen.
Lloyd, Katy, hey, I love you guys. I love your show. Thank you so much.
Do you love us, though? Do you love us, Mike? Do you really?
Very much so, yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm feeling loved, and I'm fascinated to hear your question or hear your argument.
Real quick, I do want to say I think that you gave that caller from Minnesota great advice for his sister. That was a beautiful call. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So, I was a Christian, and I was going through Bible college. And then when I started studying the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and it's a lot of the same conversations that you all have with slavery and morality, and it really made me question. I want to give Matt Dillahunty also a huge shout out, because when I was coming out of Christianity and detaching, he really helped me see that as well. But I still believed in a creation. It just seemed like you said, what I told the caller, the complexity of the human body, even through evolution. The reproductive system, birth, the brain. It just seems to me that that's just too. I can't think of the word I want to use for a random, chance. It just seems too slim.
Okay. So for me, I don't struggle with the complexity of the body, because I come from a fundamentalist background. And one of the things that I first checked on when I was challenging my fundamentalist beliefs was this idea that evolution is a false teaching, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses are told. And interestingly, in their propaganda that they print to persuade people of this, they use misquotes. They misquote scientists, which was telling me, maybe there's something not quite right here. And then when I actually investigated evolution and learned about how natural selection really works, in other words, it's not like, you have walnut, sparrow, monkey, human. It's far more sophisticated than that. So when you understand the process to a reasonable degree, I don't think I could ever say that I understand it fully, like in a scientific way. But when you understand it to a reasonable degree, it just makes total sense even in cases such as, I don't know, the human eye, for example. So are you able to kind of be a bit more specific as to why complexity precludes evolution?
I'm with you. I'm not very well versed in science like that. So unfortunately, I'm probably not able to give a real good conversation. If I'm changing I'm not trying to change the subject. If I am, just please let me know. I know you will.
I'll drag you back. Don't you do that on me, Mike. Come on. You love me. If you really love me, you won't change the subject.
I'm not. I'm not trying to change the subject. I'm trying to go at it from a way I can explain it. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's say that an asteroid landed on the Earth, and there was this cosmic cesspool, and that's what started life. It still seems that with the brain and the control that it has over the body, that it just seems like it was a design.
So
even with natural selection, it still started somewhere else.
When I think about this, I know that this is maybe a little bit of there's a false dichotomy being presented often when we have this discussion of evolution versus like intelligent design. And I always think that if there's any kind of discussion between two positions here, like evolution and something else, it's certainly not intelligent design. We could say there was like bad design versus evolution, and maybe there are some other options too that we haven't investigated. But like, for example, sometimes when I'm eating, I bite my own tongue, and like my teeth at the bottom are slightly crooked because, you know, I'm British and they have to be, but that's because my teeth are too big for my mouth. Like if I was designed, there were so many problems with humans, so many terrible designs that I, a mere mortal, could do a better job of. And if this has been created by some god, like there are so many random weird things in humans. And a good example is like our appendix. We have this thing which looks like what a lot of other mammals have, and they all use it for something, but we don't. And sometimes it causes us to die. There's so many little things like that if we were designed as humans, as we are, then we're either designed by an idiot or someone who's kind of incompetent, or by someone who's having a laugh. So like I think that it's worth like doing some more research and understanding kind of what evolution is. I know like on these scales, the numbers involved, just it's so hard to get your mind around. If you say, oh, you know, life started whatever millions of years ago, billions of years ago, and then it's just changed slowly over time, and now we've got humans, you're like, that seems pretty wacky. But like the scale of the time involved here is so big, and the amount of like cell divisions there's been in that time, and the amount of animals that have reproduced across the whole earth, the numbers here are so incredible that you just cannot get your mind around them. And I think that can often make you feel like, evolution seems kind of unlikely to me, and like humans work kind of well, so they must have been designed by something. But I think like considering that humans are pretty badly designed, and then also looking at, you know, the actual science behind evolution and seeing like common ancestors, and seeing like the eye, as Lloyd mentioned, is a really good example. We actually have in living creatures today, everything from a single cell, which can just detect whether there's light or not, all the way up to eyes more advanced than ours, which can see polarized light and a wider range of the electromagnetic spectrum and can focus faster. And there's every single step in between, and we can actually see those. And we can see them in animals which have shared ancestry, where their eyes are very similar, and they have you can see that there's like a similar evolutionary route for them. And I think that just seeing these kind of things can help your mind get around what it is that experts and scientists are asserting. Because if you just say, oh, you know, there was a meteor and suddenly 14 billion years later, here we are, that sounds very incredible. But if instead someone's like, oh, look, actually, like goats have a very similar stomach to humans, but theirs works in a slightly different way. And actually, if we go back and see where our like common ancestor is, that had a similar stomach too. But you can see how goats have developed to being able to eat like grass and literally everything, and humans haven't. And we have the same organs, but one of them doesn't. Anyway, like you can see this, and it can help you get your mind around it more, I think is what I'm the argument I'm going for here.
Well, I'll tell you, Katie, that was a really, really, really good point. I do not have any real rebuttal for that other than to go into lore, and I know that's not acceptable in this conversation. So that's got
Go to who?
Something to think about.
Who are you going to? Lloyd?
Say again?
No, lore. I think he means religious lore.
Like for me as a Germanic polytheist, to talk about the lore and the how it explains how creation
L-O-R-E.
is like
L-O-R-E, is it?
Bible, and I know that's. Say again?
When you say lore, do you mean L-O-R-E?
Yes, lore.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Or
that's okay.
The stories for a pagan and a polytheist, the lore. I mean, we really don't have the Bible, of course, but there are stories about how things happened to creation. But I know that's not acceptable in this conversation because I can't prove it. So really, what Katie said, I have no rebuttal for that. But
I think
tell you, it was
a lot of it. And can I just say as well, I've been there. I've been in this situation where I'm perplexed by evolution and find it baffling. All I can say is that I personally, at this point in my life, find it invigorating to not have all the answers and invigorating to research something that I'm not that sure about. And when I went down that particular rabbit hole with evolution, I found the information I came across incredibly satisfying. For example, one thing that creationists often do is they bundle together abiogenesis with evolution by natural selection. Now, when we're talking about the complexity of the body, there are evolutionary answers for everything in our bodies. And as Katy pointed out, our bodies are by no means perfect. I know you might look at my body and say, but Lloyd, come on, the body has to be perfect.
But you're the man.
but seriously, when it comes to the meteor thing and chemicals and abiogenesis, I understand it gets a little bit harder to grasp, although there are reasons why scientists put so much time and effort and research into that. It turns out chemicals can be so much more complicated than you and I remember from our science lessons in the chemistry lab. Chemicals can do incredible things, and it doesn't surprise me that given infinite possibilities for a certain chemical to react with another chemical and get it wrong, eventually you could have a sophisticated chemical that can remember information. And once you have that, that's when, as I understand it, evolution by natural selection can take over, and we can start to get the complexity that we see today. But that's how I understand it. I would thoroughly recommend making this an area of research. Once you're done consulting law, consult some of the science books, and then, if nothing else, you'll be better informed as to what evolutionists and atheists are saying when they talk about life arising naturally.
I will do that. I will.
Wicked.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Mike, I love you too. Thank you so much for calling through.
We love you, Mike.
Hey, I love you guys. You all take care. Have a good time.
Take care. So, Katy, it turns out my first conversation with a Germanic polytheist went really well.
That was a good conversation, yeah.
I enjoyed that. What a perfect way to end the show. Although, Katy, before we do end the show, I would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
How the hell do we find you?
Oh, yes. If you want to see me arguing with dickheads on the internet, then come to my Twitter, which is like my main thing, which is what I'm most addicted to, which is just Twitter, Katy Montgomerie. And you can, yes, it's on the screen now. I also have a YouTube channel, and I spend a lot of time debunking arguments from transphobic people, gender critical people, and TERFs. So I have a weekly show doing that. So come check that out. And also I write essays on Medium if you like reading.
I do like reading, and I will check out those things. Thank you so much indeed, Katy. I know many of you are thinking, Lloyd, how do we support this amazing show? Let me tell you, there are lots of ways. You can become a member. You can click the join button below the video. It's not that hard. It's right below the friggin' video. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. We have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can become a part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan-run Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/Talk Heathen FG. I hope you're taking notes. I'm not going to repeat this. If you'd like to continue the discussion,
stop the video.
if you can pause it after the fact when you're watching this and it's not a live stream. You can just pause it and then you can take notes. That's the way to do it. Yeah. If you'd like to continue the discussion after the show, join us in the ACD, our fan-run Discord server at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. Also, make sure to check out the newest version of the ACA show, The Non-Profits. It's not profit spelt P-R-O-F-I-T. It's profit spelt P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S, which will air live at 3 p.m. Central Time today at youtube.com/The Non-Profits ACA. But frankly, Casey, what I want to do now is see our wonderful crew.
I thought you were going to say Queen.
No, I want to. Well, I'm sure everyone wants to see the Queen, but I'd rather look at these beautiful people who are royalty in my eyes.
Oh, loving the cats too.
Absolutely. So, everyone, that's all we have for you. Remember that whether or not you believe, if you are an essential worker, we want to thank you. Thank you for saving lives. Thank you for keeping the world spinning. If you don't believe, please consider this as your community. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We're doing the love rings.
Love rings. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.
Abolish the monarchy.
Abolish the